If you've ever played Minecraft Story Mode, then you might have encountered the terrifying WITHERSTORM. This huge mob is a more destructive version of the Withers, the floating three-headed creatures found in the end. The WITHERSTORM might be one of the most powerful monsters in all of Minecraft, as it's able to suck up any blocks around it, or even other mobs, to make itself bigger and stronger. It will relentlessly attack any players or other mobs in sight by shooting exploding black blocks in their direction. So while you're out adventuring, if you ever come across this huge, multi-headed beast, then any seasoned explorer will highly recommend that you get to cover as fast as you can. Hopefully, if you find yourself a safe, well-defended spot to hide, then the WITHERSTORM might eventually float away and leave you alone. But what if a WITHERSTORM absorbed not only blocks and mobs? What if it was able to harness one of the most destructive forces of nature? If a WITHERSTORM became one with one of the 4 core elements, then would this enormous monster be even more dangerous? Well, we're about to find out as we look into the legend of Minecraft's very first fire WITHERSTORM. It's almost too scary to imagine, a WITHERSTORM that uses fire to turn into a huge tornado of flames. But surely, something like that would destroy all of Minecraft as we know it, wouldn't it? Well, to find out, we'd have to search high and low for the answers. After all, the fact that the overworld seems to be mostly still intact is a good sign at least. That must mean there are no fire WITHERSTORMs floating around and burning the place up anymore, right? There's really only one way to be sure. Start looking. Of course, nobody wants to go seeking out a creature that's so many blocks tall and covered in fire, so instead, start smaller. Ask around in any villages, see if you can pick up rumors, whispers, and fragments of old legends. No luck? Then maybe there's somewhere better to look. Think. Fire. Where does fire occur the most naturally in Minecraft? The Nether. Maybe there's more information there about the fire WITHERSTORM. So, make a start by gathering as many obsidian blocks as you can find and building a rectangle, then sparking it with some flint and steel. Sure enough, a nether portal will open up, and you can head through, continuing your search for the fire WITHERSTORM. Watch your step. The Nether is a dangerous dimension filled with fire, lava, and plenty of hostile mobs. But if you've brought along some gold armor, then you might be able to talk to some of the local inhabitants about the fire WITHERSTORM, provided you can speak Piglin, of course. After a lot of translating and maybe oinking the wrong words, one of them might be able to enlighten you. There's an old Piglin legend that talks about how the Nether came to be, and this story also explains where the fire WITHERSTORM came from and how it was created. And the tale begins not in the dimension that would one day become the Nether, but in the overworld of Minecraft. Long ago, when the first villagers began settling the land of the overworld, they very soon began to prosper. They farmed the land, harvesting vegetables and fruits that they could mostly eat raw. They would chop down trees for wood and would use that to build houses and fashion tools that were designed to make farming easier. But the real game changer was the discovery of fire. The very first villagers to explore caves and mine for more resources encountered lava deep underground, and some quickly learned the fatal lesson of what happens if you touch lava or step too close to it. They realized fire could spread across flammable blocks and burn anything in its path. It was dangerous, but if it could be controlled, then it would provide warmth, as well as a way to cook food and even fuel the smithing of better weapons and armor. So when they learned how to combine flint and steel to spark a small fire at will, the villagers began to advance their civilization far beyond where they had started. However, they weren't the only settlers living in the overworld. Far across the biomes of Minecraft, there were others just like them who were yet to discover the power of fire for themselves. One of these settlements had made their homes within the colder regions of the world, within the Ice Spikes biome. Large, frozen structures rose up out of the ground, scattered around like trees sculpted from pure ice. For those living out here, life was much harder. The harsh, cold conditions meant that there were fewer resources and little food to go around. The freezing conditions made things even worse, especially as villagers of the Ice Spikes, called Ice Dwellers, had no way to keep themselves warm besides wrapping up in many layers of woolen clothing. They did their best to build structures that would shield them from the harsh elements, but it wasn't always enough to fight back against the freezing cold. So, sadly, when other villagers began to discover fire and advance their way of life, the Ice Dwellers couldn't keep up. They were at risk of being left behind, living an outdated existence where the very environment around them threatened to wipe them out. That is, until explorers from other villages ventured out to their remote, icy settlements. The other villagers had started to trade with one another, sending traveling caravans out across the terrain to sell food, supplies, and other goods with their neighbors. And when they reached the ice dwellers, they were met with, ironically, a warm welcome. However, even though they were now able to trade for food to keep themselves going, the dwellers were still stuck out in the cold. They considered leaving, traveling with the caravans back to other villages, but the ice spikes, despite how harsh they were to live in, were the dwellers' home. With food and tools traded from the other villagers, the ice dwellers were able to catch up a little at least. They too were soon building more structures at their settlements to house themselves and mining for precious diamonds and emeralds under the ice that they could trade. But they were still behind the rest of the villages out there. To make matters worse, the conditions in the Ice Spikes biome were too cold for those that dwelt there to begin using fire. Even when traders brought flint and steel and tried to teach the ice dwellers how to utilize fire for warmth and cooking, the snow and low temperatures were enough to extinguish the flames before they could be used to benefit the dwellers in the way that fire had provided food, light, and warmth to other villages. That is, until one day, when one of the trading caravans brought with them a mysterious tome. The ice dwellers bought it out of curiosity, thinking that some good reading material could at least distract them from how cold they were. You see, by now, a few other settlements had discovered how to harness magic and had begun practicing it in small ways for the benefit of their villages. They would enchant armor or weapons, then sell these improved pieces to their neighbors for even greater amounts of emeralds. But what caught the attention of the ice dwellers was a chapter that the other villagers had ignored. This particular section of the spellbook explains how to harness the power of the elements: earth, wind, water, and of course, the fire that they coveted so much. It didn't take very long for the ice dwellers to start trying to teach themselves this fire magic, eager to use it not only so they could catch up with the other villages out there, but also so they could continue to survive in their frosty homes. However, in their enthusiasm, the dwellers might have overlooked the warnings that were written alongside the spells in their new book. They explained that tampering with the forces of nature was a dangerous enterprise to undertake, especially for novices in the magical arts. Mixing magic with the laws of nature could often have the unfortunate outcome of bringing life to certain things that shouldn't be alive. Tamper with the wrong spell, and you might create an army of zombies, or flying phantoms, or a fire WITHERSTORM. The ice dwellers didn't immediately make their fateful mistake though. Instead, they started smaller. They just wanted to use the spellbook to cast fire, but fires that wouldn't fizzle out in the freezing cold of the ice spikes. They spent days trying to decipher the instructions, while others from their settlement constructed a space in the center of town where they could all go to feel the warmth of this magical fire. But instead, something else would be summoned when the ice dwellers tried to cast a magical fire spell. Only it wasn't a fire WITHERSTORM, not yet. Instead, it was a similar creature, a blaze. Nobody had ever seen anything like it before. It was a swirling mass of glowing hot blaze rods, billowing smoke, and it wasn't exactly staying still in the town center either. The blaze wasn't quite hostile to the ice dwellers. The cold temperature kept it at least docile, but it was floating freely rather than staying put. And of course, it's not so easy to harness fire for cooking and smithing if that fire is wandering off. The ice dwellers tried all they could think of to keep the blaze contained. They fashioned fences and set them up in a perimeter around the fiery mob to keep the blaze contained like an animal in a pen. But that didn't work. The fences were made out of wood, and the blaze could simply hurl a few fireballs at the obstruction to burn it to ash in seconds. Then, one of the ice dwellers suggested trying to use the book again. Magic had summoned this flaming creature to their settlement, so maybe magic could be the key to sending it away, or summoning something else to get rid of this pesky blaze. Unfortunately, the dwellers were once again more focused on deciphering the spells than reading any of the warnings that came afterward. When they started trying to summon help, they didn't realize what was written in the spellbook about other dimensions, specifically a mysterious place called the End. The ice dwellers all fell silent as those with the spellbook finished the incantation. In the center of their frozen settlement was a dark, undead creature floating above the ground like the blaze. It looked skeletal, with 3 heads and an unsettling aura that put everyone in the village on edge. Most backed away or hid in their homes, uncertain of what to make of the wither that had just appeared. The wither surveyed the area around it, noticing the dwellers all hiding before it spotted the blaze. Still wandering the edges of town, it drifted towards it, ready to strike. Boom! The wither launched exploding skulls at the blaze. Startled, the burning mob turned and retaliated, launching fireballs at the wither. They began chasing each other around the frozen village, launching flaming explosive attacks at each other that ended up damaging the surrounding houses. The ice dwellers with the spellbook were desperately flipping through its pages, trying to find a spell to just send both of the creatures somewhere else before they destroyed the whole settlement. But in their haste, they cast what they thought was a combustion spell, but it was in fact a combination spell. The moment the magic words were spoken, both the wither and the blaze started being drawn together before colliding. They spun around and around, the wither's shadowy skulls crossing paths with the blaze's burning blaze rods as the pair formed a wild whirlwind that only began to get bigger and bigger. The ice dwellers looked to the sky in horror to see this new creature towering above them, the WITHERSTORM. Burning a bright, blazing orange, the WITHERSTORM started spewing flames from the mouths of its many heads. It incinerated entire wooden structures to ashes in seconds, melting the snow and ice around it at the same time. It was drawing more and more of the burned block towards itself, pulling them in with a tractor beam that added the blocks to itself and made the burning monster even stronger. The ice dwellers ran for their lives, scattering in every direction as the homes they'd managed to survive in for so long erupted into huge burning pyres. They'd tried so hard to endure the harsh life in the ice spikes, but in trying to mess with the forces of nature, they'd used magic to create an unstoppable force of fiery destruction. From over the snow-capped hills, the WITHERSTORM could be seen destroying all in its path, engulfing everything around it in flames. It had grown so large that it was quickly spotted by someone approaching in search of the ice dwellers' village. Traders. Arriving from their own settlement, they saw the devastation unfolding as the WITHERSTORM set alight all in its path. They could have fled and abandoned the ice dwellers to their fiery fate, but instead the trading caravan rushed in to help. The buckets of water they carried were quickly thrown over burning houses, but that did no good in the cold. The water either wasn't enough to douse the flames or would freeze thanks to the icy biome. But thinking quickly, one of the ice dwellers handed the spellbook to the traders. The other villages had been practicing magic for much longer. Their skills would be far greater than the dwellers' own novice understanding. Sure enough, one of the traders took up the spellbook and began reciting an incantation. The WITHERSTORM sensed something was happening to it and started unleashing waves of fire over the area. The ice dwellers hurriedly evacuated before they too were caught in the flames, aided by the traders. The ones with the spellbook worked together, trying their best to banish the WITHERSTORM once and for all. Suddenly there came the crack of thunder from above. A bolt of lightning shot down from the sky and struck the gigantic burning creature. The spell had worked, and not a moment too soon. In a flash, the WITHERSTORM was gone, but it had left the ice dwellers' home in ruins. With heavy hearts, they packed up what little they could salvage and followed the traveling traders back to their villages, where they'd be welcomed with new homes, food, and beds, and of course, fires that were safe and under control. But what became of the WITHERSTORM? Well, it seemed the spell hadn't destroyed it. Instead, the towering tornado of flames was sent to another dimension, a place where it could burn and burn endlessly. The WITHERSTORM's inferno spread all across this new world it had been sent to, charring everything into a cinder and leaving pools of lava all over. Some say it's still lurking there to this day, in a realm that everyone else knows as the Nether.